Jayden Daniels is clearly the franchise quarterback, and as Washington opens its mandatory minicamp with that question answered, it's the other battles that could help reshape the 2025 roster. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Commanders, where we watch the film, break down the data, and call it like we see it. I'm your host, David Harrison. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And not only am I here for you and with you 5 days a week, but I'm also covering your Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com and WUSA9.com. I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view today. Whether you're an everydayer or you're just checking us out, I appreciate you all the same. But to those everydayers who come through for every single show, a special thank you goes out to you. And if everybody out there hasn't already subscribed on YouTube or for free where you're listening to this episode right now, please do so at this time. If it's your first time here, thanks for finding us. Thanks for coming through. Hopefully you like what you hear and you come back again soon. Coming up on today's episode, why Washington probably doesn't need Jaire Alexander, who's making an early push in some of the team's most competitive push position battles, and how Jayden Daniels is already showing the command you want from your franchise quarterback as we look ahead to mandatory minicamp kicking off on Tuesday. Jayden Daniels looking like the franchise quarterback. Looked like it last season, to be honest with you. Coming into this offseason, hearing a lot of great things, seeing some good things about him that just further reinforce your belief that he is the franchise quarterback of this team. So at that spot locked down, minicamp becomes all about the battles around him and how that sets the stage for training camp, from receiver depth to right tackle and a reshuffled secondary. The 3-day mandatory minicamp kicking off for the Washington Commanders in Ashburn, Virginia on Tuesday, scheduled to run Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, we'll tell you a little bit of a caveat. Traditionally, when things go well, when the players show up and give a lot of effort and do all those things, teams sometimes tend to allow those players to have that Thursday off, that third day of the minicamp off, as a reward, right? As just a little bit of a treat for, hey, we appreciate your effort. We appreciate you coming here, especially when you have teams that have a lot of people participating in the voluntary portion of the workouts, all of those things. So we do anticipate at least a possibility that Thursday practice may get canceled, and the camp may end up only running Tuesday and Wednesday, and the players will get a little bit of an early head start to what basically amounts to their summer vacation as they come back late July for training camp, and then we roll right into the NFL season. So mandatory minicamp, what is it going to look like? No pads. You're going to have helmets. You're going to have some full teamwork. 7-on-7s, of course, will be in there too, but you are going to have some 11-on-11s. It's the final on-field phase of the final on-field portion, rather, of phase 3, the last portion of the offseason before we get to training camp, which, of course, will get started next month. So looking at the attendance, fortunately for the Washington Commanders, the majority of players attending the entirety of the voluntary portion of the offseason programs. Some players not participating in any portion. Well, I say one player not participating in at least the voluntary portion of phase 3. Terry McLaurin missing the final day of phase 2 and then missing the entirety of phase 3, at least up to this point. We'll see if he decides to show up. Laramie Tunsil was also absent during the voluntary portion of phase 3. However, he was seen, shown by the team at photo day, media photo day. So that presumably would indicate that he's probably going to be at practice, not seen, at least not in the photos shared by the Commanders, which, to be fair, they didn't share all of them anyway. A cornerback, Marshawn Lattimore, and whether or not he is going to be there. I don't expect Terry McLaurin to be there unless there is a contract signed. I don't even think we're going to get a hold in as far as Terry attending but not practicing. Now, it is possible because again, now, like the last time Terry did this, he did a holdout. He wasn't there for the mandatory minicamp, got his contract, all those things. But you could forgive those fines back then. Now you can't forgive the fines if you're the team. So Terry McLaurin skips the mandatory portion. He's going to get fined, and he's going to have to pay those fines. Of course, we've talked about previous episodes of ways that the team can kind of help him out with that just a little bit. Laramie Tunsil, again, expected him to be there anyway, but after you see those photos, you certainly expect him to be there for the mandatory minicamp. Marshawn Lattimore, I got to be honest with you guys, I'm a little bit on the fence of whether or not I think Marshawn Lattimore is going to be there, but I am leaning on yes. I do think Marshawn Lattimore is going to be at practice on Tuesday. Hopefully I'm not wrong, because he's on the thumbnail for this episode on YouTube. So there's a reason for it, because we're going to talk about Marshawn quite a bit here in this episode. But Marshawn Lattimore, I'm going to go 60-40. 60-40, I expect him to be there. So there is that 40%. Players to watch, Jayden Daniels, like we talked about at the top of the episode, right? True blue franchise quarterback. The team has said multiple times, Laramie Tunsil's the only guy that has a job locked down. I would probably say Jayden Daniels also does, but they probably just think that goes without saying, right? We're going to get more 11 on 11s. So we want to see him just further in command. They were talking about the word, or using the word mastery, right? Master the offense, really get in control of it, do all those things. Want to see more of that. Again, you're not going to see a lot of checks and audibles and all that stuff anyway. So it's a little bit hard to fully get the scope of the offense, but just the confidence, you just continue to see that run at a very high level. Rhythm. He's got some new receivers on the roster, guys like Deebo Samuel, Jalen Lane. Even Luke McCaffrey, right? He's playing faster than he was last year, according to Cliff Kingsbury. So he's a little bit of a different receiver himself. Want to see that rhythm between these guys. We've already seen the Zach Ertz connection several times during the OTA practices that we got to attend. So it's good to see that, but you want to continue to see that as well. Would love to see Ben Sinnott get involved in that as well. John Bates, underrated receiver, getting involved during OTAs as well. Leadership presence. I want to kind of keep an eye on Jayden Daniels and see, is the leadership that he shows more of the, just kind of like, I'm one of the players, but I'm obviously a quarterback type of vibe, or is there a little bit more of a deliberate leadership vibe to him on the practice field? Just kind of want to see if that's there. It doesn't really, I'm not going to sit here and say like it's a negative if there's not, but it would be a positive if there was, if that makes sense. Laramie Tunsil, how does the O-line look with him? We haven't seen this offensive line with Laramie Tunsil in action just yet. So how might that look with him? Of course, there's always a possibility, because Laramie is an older veteran, that he's there. Maybe he does individuals, but maybe he doesn't do teamwork because they don't want to risk overworking him or the injury or whatever. So, but we'll see if Laramie Tunsil's out there with that 5-man rotation, even if it's just lined up for individuals, we'll at least get a glimpse of that. But you'd love to see him out there on the 11-on-11 drills. Daron Payne. There's been a lot of talk about D tackle Daron Payne so far this OTA period. So obviously the spotlight is now on him, right? What does it look like as far as leadership on the field? If it's vocal, if it's checks, if it's things like that. Plus, how does the new defensive front unit and the rotation, how does that look? How does that go? It's a little bit tricky because they want to get guys like Joe Witt Jr. talked about this last week. Like, we want to get a guy up there with, Bobby Wagner. And so they can hear the check and hear the call and react to it and communicate and do all that stuff. So it's not like a 1-for-1 where, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, and Jordan McGee are on the field at the same time. You're like, oh man, Jordan McGee potentially going to be one of 3 starting linebackers. You can't really go that far on it because they do mix and match a lot of different things. And then of course, Marshawn Lattimore, looking back at him, if he is there, if he's on the field, how does the cornerback group look? Has Trey Amos already worked his way up over, say, Jonathan Jones, and it's Marshawn Lattimore and Trey on the field at the same time? I have a feeling you're going to get a combination and a mixture of all 3 of those perimeter guys at the same time. Jacob Martin, I'm very intrigued by Jacob Martin and the usage of him, so I'm going to be keeping an eye on what they do with him. And then, of course, Trey Amos, the rookie cornerback. You want to see if he can continue his great phase 3 performance so far. Looking at position battles and depth chart situations, wide receiver 4 through 6, I think it has to be one of these standout position battles we're looking at. You got Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane, Michael Gallup, KJ Osborne made a really good play on Wednesday, the OTA practice. Ja'Cory Brooks, the UDFA, can he make a 2-day or 3-day minicamp push to build some hype heading into the quote unquote dead season between this and training camp? Safety position, Will Harris is obviously there, but are there any suitors to challenge him to play next to Quan Martin other than the veteran? I think the veteran's really good, but could there be some other guys? You've also got the safety linebacker hybrid role, Tyler Owens, Dominique Hampton, Kane Madrano. Anybody else going to, kind of stick their nose into that race? And then the right tackle position, right? Andrew Wiley and first round draft pick Josh Connerly Jr. I think all of those things, the unfortunate part is I only got one set of eyes, so I can't watch all of it all the time. But these are all the things that we're going to be trying to look for as we get to minicamp. I have to split it up, half of that day 1, half of that day 2, and then go from there. As the Commanders sort through key battles at receiver, in the secondary, and across the offensive line, one name not in the building made a lot of headlines on Monday, and it's a big one. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jayden Daniels looks like a franchise quarterback. That much is clear. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money, who wants to talk about the rest of the roster. Washington still has a lot of questions to answer. And if your finances feel the same way, you got a lot of things to answer. Some clarity there might help confuse or might settle some of the confusion. Monarch Money can help you out with all that. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over every part of your financial life. But Monarch isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts and investments and spending in one place so you can stop managing your money and start building financial momentum. Momentum is a real thing, ladies and gentlemen. When I started using Monarch, I really realized, I already knew, but I really realized how much I was using on food delivery. Just laying that out kind of helped me see it, put it in perspective, and make smarter decisions and actually hit some of my financial goals. So whatever you're managing your finances, whether you're solo, whether you're a partner, Monarch makes it simple to stay aligned and in control. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. The secondary is already a little bit crowded, but when a two-time Pro Bowler like Jaire Alexander hits the market, people pay attention. And the question has to be asked, is he worth the call? A cup of coffee, a visit maybe, or does he just not fit what Washington is building? So the news breaking on Monday, kind of expected here for the last little bit. Green Bay Packers officially releasing veteran cornerback Jaire Alexander. Why is he being released? Well, it's multiple levels, right? But primarily injuries. Jaire Alexander's played just 18 of a possible 53 games through 2021, 23, and 24, and just 34 of 68, 50% exactly, from 2021 to last year. So in 2022, he did play 16 games. He was also a Pro Bowler in that one season. In the last four, they played a full season, had 5 interceptions that year. So when Jaire Alexander is on the field, very talented cornerback. The problem is, at least lately, right, again, 3 of the last 4 years, has not been on the field a lot. And there's the old saying of the most important ability is availability, and Jaire just has not had a ton of it. The other reason that they're releasing him, not just because he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but salary cap. The Green Bay Packers are saving more than $17 million against their salary cap this year with a post-June 1st release of the cornerback. 2-time Pro Bowler, 2-time second-team All-Pro. But again, he's missed 14 games in the last 2 years. The Green Bay Packers did try to trade him, or at least they were open to trading him, I guess is the verbiage that was used. They were open to trading him. I don't know how hard they really went at trying to trade him. Locked On Packers host Peter Bukowski just recently actually did a YouTube short about the possibility that he may be staying in Green Bay. So it certainly wasn't like a done deal, slam dunk, he's going to get moved type of situation. But, you know, they did have some conversations, or at least were open to having conversations about trading him. They did also offer Jaire an incentive-heavy restructured deal to his current contract that would make him an unrestricted free agent this year, give the Green Bay Packers back some of that guaranteed money, and give him the opportunity to go earn it by being available. And he declined to take it, which a lot of veteran players would not like to take a deal that doesn't have a lot of guaranteed money in it, because that's they look, the injuries are part of the job. You pay me to do the job, and so the team has to kind of take on some of that risk. The Green Bay Packers essentially feel like they've paid out enough of that risk over the last few years and didn't want to pay any more of that. So Jaire Alexander free sign with whoever he wants, and that signing could literally come at any moment, including while we're recording this very episode, to be quite honest with you. But hopefully it holds off just a little bit for us. The pros to signing Jaire Alexander. He's elite man cover corner when he's healthy. In fact, he's downright shut down cornerback when he's healthy. Not unlike Marshawn Lattimore, right? Experience in high pressure playoff type environments, played 7 career playoff games. So he's got a lot of experience in those types of things. Certainly some potential short-term upside. And again, an incentive heavy deal. I think whatever deal he gets on the open market is going to be very, very incentive dependent. Just because he's not going to take it with the Green Bay Packers doesn't mean he's not going to take it for someone else. There's a lot of players I've talked to over the years as far as taking contracts. Like, it's one thing to take a lesser than desirable contract from a team that doesn't know you and hasn't had you and all that stuff. And it's a whole other one to take one from a team who knows you, because you feel like you've earned a little bit of standing, clout maybe within that organization, and they should respect that. They should honor that. And they should, quite frankly, pay you for it, especially when you're talking about guys who are mid-round draft picks who outperform their contracts for the early part of their career. A lot of times those guys want to get paid a little bit for that on the back end when they get their new deal. So that could be a situation that Jaire is facing. Basically, it's like, listen, I understand the rest of the league is probably going to want to give me an incentive-laced contract, but that's them. You're the Green Bay Packers. You know what I've done for you. You know what I've been through for you, how I battled and all this other stuff. I deserve, right? That's kind of the phrase that's usually used, to be treated better than, the rest of the league is going to treat me by you. And I don't know if that's exactly what's going on, but that's typically kind of, at least to a certain extent, how the vibes go with this thing. So a reason to pass on Jaire Alexander, well, the injuries, right? The injury history is very significant, more significant than it was with Marshawn Lattimore when this team traded for him last season. And I already know a very good amount of Commanders fans had an issue with trading for Marshawn Lattimore, given his injury history. So given Jaire's injury history, probably not as many people who are going to be on board with it. And then you're already dealing with Marshawn Lattimore. You've already got a veteran corner in your room that's got a pretty extensive injury history right now that you're kind of just hoping is going to stay healthy. So there's certainly a downside to adding another one. And your cornerback room is not completely deep, but is at least fairly deep, right? So likely that Jaire isn't going to be keen on accepting a rotational role. He wants the opportunity to at least go out there and get a starting job. Now, this team, again, preaches competition, and the best guys are going to start on the field. So that would be, potentially what he could find in Washington if they're going to stay true to that conversation. Now, Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr., they trust internal competition. So you already have Marshawn Lattimore and Jonathan Jones, who both have a history of outside starting cornerback experience. Trey Amos, your second-round draft pick out of Ole Miss, outside corner, looks very legit right now. I just don't see the value of burying one of those guys in cornerback purgatory, because then eventually it's either going to be Jaire or one of those three that's going to be your cornerback number 4. And I don't see Jaire being happy being cornerback number 4 either. So even though you trust the competition and all that stuff, like, okay, that's one thing to say, like, yeah, I'm coming into competition, but what if that competition happens and you're number 4? Like, how are you going to feel about that, right? If he's willing to come in and be part of a 4-man competition for 2 jobs and understand I might end up being number 4, and this is going to be a cheap deal. Like, if I don't get on the field, I'm not going to hit my incentives and I'm not going to get paid. Then, all right, I'd be fine with that, because Jaire is a super talented guy. Then you got Mikey Sanders still inside, along with Noah Igbenogany, who basically becomes your second nickel corner or 5th outside guy, plus Will Harris and Quan Martin, who are both safeties but can play in the slot in a pinch if you need to. So, I mean, that's a pretty good secondary right there. Like, that alone is a pretty good secondary. So why would Jaire do it? Well, he's kind of in a career position where you kind of got to take the best of a bad situation, right? Like, you're not going to get a whole lot of like blow the socks off or blow the doors off the hinges type of offers. And nobody's probably going to come in and really guarantee you a starting job. That's also a very good team, right? Like, the better the team, the less your guarantees. The worse the team, the more your guarantees, because I don't know, they're hoping you're just going to like sell jerseys and stuff like that. Jaire turns 29 next February, so he's not exactly over the hill. But again, with that injury history, it's definitely not looking good. He's kind of losing his ability to be picky, to be quite honest with you. Plus, if he can stay healthy past week 1 with Washington, then he'll go to Lambeau week 2, Thursday Night Football, prime time. That might be a little bit of an incentive by itself. So while adding a name like Jaire Alexander sounds tempting, the truth is Washington may not really need him, because the group they already have in the secondary might be stronger than most of us realize. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Washington may not need to look outside for help in their secondary, because with Marshawn Lattimore healthy, we presume, Trey Amos certainly turning heads early on, and Mikey Sanders still back where he belongs, the secondary might already have everything it needs. And, oh, by the way, Jonathan Jones, the veteran from the New England Patriots, came over in free agency, also in the mix there. Don't want to forget him. So looking at Marshawn Lattimore, I think, look, when you're going to stack it on paper, by names and all that stuff, Marshawn Lattimore is still your quarterback number 1, even though I understand he didn't have like the greatest end of 2024 with the Commanders after he was traded over by the Saints, but he's still, at least from a namesake perspective, that top perimeter cornerback, right? Veteran presence, high-end corner who can play now and get full camp and is hopefully healthy, right? All that stuff certainly matters. Getting that full camp experience, getting that full run-up, and I get it. Like, that's why you'd love to have him here during the voluntary portions. But look, man, like, it's voluntary. It's just hard to really critique or criticize a guy for not being here when it's voluntary. If it was supposed to be, or if it was really that necessary, then the league and the players would have found a way to make it mandatory, right? But the bottom line is Marshawn, no matter what, whenever he shows up, he's a tone setter. The defense just feels different when he's out there. Even when he's out there and he's not really having the greatest game in the world, the defense just feels and appears to play just a little bit more aggressive, right? He just kind of brings that flavor to the unit. So there's a value there. Then you've got Trey Amos, and I think the battle there you look at really is Trey Amos versus Jonathan Jones. Jones is 31, but he's got 71 career starts under his belt. That's a lot of experience. Amos is, of course, the hotshot rookie. His impressive performances can be taken to heart a little bit. Like the thing about this phase is, we all know this, right? It's a quarterback-driven league. It's an offensive-driven league. It's a points-driven league. The NFL is a lot of restrictions on how much the cornerbacks can really contact the receivers anyway, even in the regular season with full pads. So Trey, like his coverage that he's showing, that he's been impressing with so much is, it has a tendency to transfer fully once the pads come on. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be a 1-for-1, certainly, but with any position in this phase, I'm trying to be a little bit careful how I say this because I don't want people to get too overblown, but things that you see in this phase are things that can actually directly transfer over. Whereas like you see a guy getting, a really great pass rush against the offensive line. Well, they can't really fully block either and can't really, fully do all the things that they need to do against the defensive players. So you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. Running back, same thing. These defensive linemen can't hit them. The linebackers can't hit them. They can't fully dedicate themselves getting in that gap, right? But a corner, like when a corner is doing really well and being real sticky in coverage and showing really great instincts and all that stuff, a lot of times that stuff will translate. Doesn't guarantee it, but again, the impression is there. And so I think it's important to not get overly hyped about it, but there's a reason why people are so excited about it. Don't forget, both Amos and Jones are competing with Lattimore as well, right? So Lattimore, again, going back to there are no sacred goats. Laramie Tunsil's the only one with a guaranteed job. Like Marshawn's not guaranteed a job either, which is more of a compelling reason for him to have been here during the voluntary portions. But if Trey Amos can beat out either a 9-year vet in Jonathan Jones for a starting job or a multi-time Pro Bowler in Marshawn Lattimore for a starting job, then he's definitely doing the right thing as a rookie. And I think, I'm going to put him in the early running for Defensive Rookie of the Year. It's pretty hard. But if you're Trey Amos playing opposite of Marshawn Lattimore, you might get some passes. You might get some targets and some opportunities, get some interceptions and make some plays. You've also got the nickel role. Not really a battle, right? Mikey Sanders still is the starter. He's the number one guy, but I think Noah Igbenogany is the second guy over there. Mostly seeing him on the outside during the OTAs, but I don't think you can just forget and discard everything he did last year as well. And Mikey, back where he belongs, kind of inside. Really no surprise there and no hint of angst from him about that move back inside. Noah Igbenogany, kind of already talked about him basically playing more back outside where he started his NFL career, but certainly can move inside as he demonstrated in 2024. Will Harris, when the team needs 2 cover safeties, then you put him back there deep with Quan Martin. If they need 2 slots, like if the team goes 4 wide, then you put him in the slot. If they need someone to step up for Mikey, he can do that. And they have some solid safety depth as well. Going to the safety group, Quan Martin, Will Harris, Jeremy Reeves, who they flat out said that they want to find reps for, Tyler Owens, Percy Butler, undrafted free agent, Rob McDaniel. That's 6 guys. And you're talking about what, 4 or 5 spots? I think Quan, I think Revo, I think Owens, and I think Butler. They're all the returning guys. Harris basically replaces Chin on the roster, at least paper-wise, right? So that basically your 1-for-1 matches from last year's roster. So if McDaniel makes a push like Tyler Owens did last year, I think Percy Butler is probably the guy that's furthest on the bubble, right, in the safety room. So I think that's probably the biggest battle right there is Rob McDaniel, undrafted free agent safety, against Percy Butler, who's trying to show that he's a part of this unit. Cornerbacks, again, like I said, like last year, the team had Forbes, Emmanuel Forbes, Benjamin St. Juste. They got Lattimore. They had Noah Igbenogany, Mikey Sanderson, and Michael Davis, right? That was like the majority of their active roster. This year, they've got Lattimore, Igbenogany, Sanders still back. So 2 or 3 theoretical spots open. Trey Amos takes one of those. So if there's 1 or 2 more, does that open up the door for Rob McDaniel? He's on a corner, but like just as a DB to get on the roster, or is that where Jaire Alexander comes in, right? Maybe another UDFA. Carlin Viggers is out there trying to make impression. Fentrell Cypress is out there trying to make an impression, or maybe both of them make the roster. There's a lot of things potentially that could happen with this team. And that's why it's going to be a lot of fun to go out there and watch this week. There's still plenty to sort through before we get to training camp. But based on what's showing up now, Washington looks like, to me, it may have already gotten the right pieces in place for their secondary. Now, doesn't mean they won't look anywhere else. Just maybe they don't need to look anywhere else. That's going to do it for today's episode, our mandatory minicamp preview episode. Coming up next on Locked On Commanders, our full breakdown from the first day of mandatory minicamp. Who stood out, who surprised, and what the early rotations are telling us about where this roster is heading. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, you can text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your second listen today, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino. As training camps get closer and roster moves keep coming, they're going to keep you, the most informed NFL fans around. You can find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day. To all the everydayers, I see you, I appreciate you, and I thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be good to one another. We'll talk again soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.